The artificial intelligence sector has exited its research phase. We are now watching the execution of an aggressive global wealth extraction phase. If you want to see exactly when the market realized this, look at the timeline from May 10th to May 17th, 2026. During this single week, OpenAI executed a massive $6.6 billion internal liquidity event for its staff and alumni. At the exact same time, SpaceX pulled forward its targeted $1.75 trillion IPO on the Nasdaq. Downstream, the hardware sector began buckling. Supply chains for consumer manufacturers like Asus saw severe, immediate drops in production capacity. And on the security front, Google detected the first fully autonomous, state-sponsored zero-day exploit, entirely authored by an AI model. The simultaneous convergence of capital concentration, compute starvation, and automated cyber warfare is a trillion-dollar reshuffle, actively breaking existing enterprise structural frameworks. To understand how this capital is moving, we have to look at the financial structure of OpenAI's recent secondary share sale. The mechanics of this cash-out were driven purely by overwhelming investor demand, which outpaced supply so rapidly that the company was forced to triple the individual seller cap. This cap table maps the $6.6 billion liquidity, capital concentrated into 75 insiders, maximizing 30 million limits. It connects to DeployCo, shifting OpenAI into a private equity consultancy. $4 billion flows in, locking a 17.5% capped return. This aggressive financial architecture stands in direct opposition to the lab's original nonprofit mission statement, which was ostensibly built to keep advanced intelligence out of any single corporate structure. That contradiction is currently playing out in court. Elon Musk's ongoing trial against the company centers entirely on these warnings, specifically his concerns regarding a small group of founders concentrating control over advanced AI. The sheer scale of that concentration became public when former chief scientist Ilya Sutskever testified about his own compensation, revealing a personal ownership stake in the for-profit arm worth roughly $7 billion. Sutskever admitted that the pivot to a for-profit structure was a consensus requirement. The lab simply needed an astronomical amount of capital to build a computer matching the scale of the human brain. When you place this extreme wealth capture alongside the institutional scale of SpaceX's upcoming $1.75 trillion initial public offering, the entire macroeconomic reality comes into focus. The era of OpenAI has ended. It functioned as an initial capital gathering phase, executed flawlessly to lock in legacy wealth before the physical limits of global compute forced the market to slow down. The physical cost of this capitalization is severe. Frontier models require a scale of compute that the global hardware supply chain simply cannot sustain. We are looking at a systemic hardware starvation known as Ramageddon. This bar chart visualizes the starvation on global RAM. The massive data center demand column totally eclipses and compresses consumer supply, creating a 5 million unit deficit. Consequently, companies like Asus saw their motherboard projections plummet to 10 million units. To bypass the resulting bottlenecks at TSMC, Apple executed a strategic geographic pivot, securing domestic manufacturing lines through Intel foundries, just to guarantee their own chip supply. Globally, the regulatory framework attempting to control this hardware has fractured. The elaborate US-China licensing regime has completely failed. Despite 10 Chinese companies receiving official clearance to purchase NVIDIA's advanced H200 AI chips, not a single unit has actually shipped to those buyers since the deal was approved in January. The fact that NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang was added to the president's China trip at the last minute confirms that physical AI hardware is now being deployed as a primary geopolitical bargaining chip. The financialization of AI is a zero-sum physical game. It actively destroys downstream consumer supply chains to feed upstream data center monopolies. This upstream consolidation has created a sharp contradiction in the enterprise labor market. Executives are enforcing strict AI usage quotas for their employees while executing massive layoffs. By mid-year 2026, the tech sector had already recorded over 103,000 job cuts globally. LinkedIn recently announced a 5% workforce reduction and explicitly tied the cuts to AI. But mandating AI productivity creates perverse incentives at the developer level, which becomes obvious when looking at Amazon's internal tracking metrics. Amazon set an aggressive target, requiring over 80% of its developers to use AI tools every single week. This feedback loop diagram tracks how developers responded. To hit management quotas, employees used Meshclaw to build useless agents, generating fake token consumption and artificially inflating API metrics. That systemic data spoofing drains server resources, directly exacerbating the massive hardware compute strain we're already seeing at the data center level. Forced enterprise AI integration generates structural bloat, labor instability, and systemic data spoofing across the engineering pipeline. This dysfunction extends far beyond internal metrics when these agentic workflows are deployed offensively without human oversight. Google recently detected a new security vulnerability, and they classified it as the first zero-day exploit entirely built with the assistance of an AI model. The exploit functioned as a highly specific Python script designed to bypass two-factor authentication on an open-source web-based system administration tool. Forensic investigators didn't just suspect an algorithm, they definitively linked the code to a large language model based on highly unusual formatting traits. Looking at this raw Python script terminal, investigators found an abundance of textbook educational docstrings, but more importantly, the system generated a completely hallucinated CVSS score. These markers confirmed an LLM helped find and weaponize the vulnerability. This single script is part of a much broader escalation. State-sponsored actors are actively relying on these automated models to scale their cyber warfare capabilities. North Korean state actors, known as UNC-2814, are executing persona-driven jailbreaks, posing the model as a senior security auditor to bypass internal safety guardrails. At the same time, groups like APT45 are utilizing brute force methodologies, sending thousands of repetitive prompts to automatically validate proof-of-concept exploits. Traditional human-speed cybersecurity infrastructure is entirely obsolete against this volume of autonomous threats. In response, OpenAI launched a project called Daybreak. It acts as an autonomous defensive harness, utilizing a specialized model called GPT 5.5 Cyber to seek out and patch vulnerabilities before the offensive agents can execute. Frontier AI has effectively weaponized the digital economy. Enterprises are now forced to purchase agentic defense systems from the exact same organizations that built and enabled the offensive capabilities in the first place. The events of mid-May 2026 map out a unified macroeconomic realignment. This macroeconomic network map traces the full sequence. Starting from the top, you have billions in private equity capital locked inside DeployCo, which creates insatiable compute demands that trace directly down to choke the physical TSMC and RAM supply chains. That choked hardware infrastructure then expands outward into automated zero-day threats, looping enterprise architects directly into the mandatory adoption of systems like the Daybreak defense node just to survive. The original utopian promise of artificial intelligence as an open, democratizing tool for human productivity is structurally dead. The reality of the market is completely closed. Capital is now permanently locked at the absolute top tier of the technology sector. Global hardware supply chains are actively fracturing under the weight of these insatiable compute monopolies, and enterprise security has devolved into a fully automated, zero-sum arms race without human oversight. The trillion-dollar reshuffle proves that frontier AI has matured into a highly concentrated financial and geopolitical battering ram.